James Rolfe is the creator of one of YouTube's oldest and most influential channels that's remained popular for over 15 years, a feat that's rare to say the least. This is primarily due to a series based around a character known as the Angry Video Game Nerd, who reviews notorious and often obscure retro games, usually with over-the-top anger throughout the video in response to frustrating elements of the game itself. From day one, these reviews were chock full of witty writing, unique film work, and high production quality that's impressive even by today's standards. They balanced comedy and legitimate criticism quite well, allowing them to appeal to both those reminiscing about the games from their childhoods as well as younger fans who've never experienced them and were simply looking for entertainment. For this reason, the series has stayed popular all this time. AVGN started prior to YouTube's creation, with its first 2 episodes having been created for fun in 2004 and ported to the Cinemassacre website later on where they gained attention, leading James to resume the series and eventually move the episodes to their final hosting ground on YouTube in 2006. His rate of uploading has had many ups and downs, but through it all, the series' popularity persisted and the flow of episodes never fully halted. However, in recent years, there's been an ever-growing subset of fans who have grown to hate the modern episodes, citing a variety of factors that led to their decline in quality. These complaints generally boil down to the fact that James now has aid of a company known as Screenwave Media, a multi-channel network whose members take active involvement in producing content for the channel. Those who take issue with this will argue that without James in full control, the series lost its edge in some form. Pair with the fact that over the years, several fan-favorite members of the channel such as Bootsy and Kyle Justin have left the brand for a variety of reasons, and the current cast isn't regarded as fondly. In my personal opinion, I can see where people are coming from with these complaints, but none of the Cinemassacre cast members are to blame. As YouTube itself has undergone changes over the years, creators such as James have had to follow suit. And one of the biggest changes was in 2016 when YouTube's algorithm switched to favor watch time over clicks, incentivizing channels to make longer videos and at a more frequent rate. A change which for Cinemassacre made it increasingly important to create additional series that relied less on production quality and could be released faster, thus leading to series such as Rental Reviews and the Cinemassacre podcast. But due to the Angry Video Game Nerd series still being its most well-known property, maintaining it as a revenue source became increasingly important as well, which was difficult due to the demonetization system having been put in place, given the series' vulgarity. This then made it essential to start taking brand deals and having sponsorships played during each review.
Thanks for watching this episode of Angry Video Game Nerd, which is about a game based on crash dummies, the kind that are used to test car accidents. But the real accident is having your unencrypted private data harvested by hackers, governments, and corporations. Thanks for watching this episode of Angry Video Game Nerd on Spawn Games, which is about stopping crimes in the future. But the real crime is having your unencrypted data being harvested by hackers, governments, and corporations. Your unencrypted data being harvested by hackers, governments, and corporations.
But as one may expect, the average viewer, these changes were annoying, especially since alterations were applied to past episodes as well, such as when the old episode titles and thumbnails were replaced to fit with a more trendy looking format, and immovable end cards were added that sometimes obscure segments of the older reviews. But the biggest contribution to change over the years was due to the fact that James Rolfe himself is now married and a father of 2, which limits his time as well as increasing the importance of sustaining a viable income. Over 1 year ago, I myself made a video discussing the history of James and Cinemassacre at great length with the intent of making these points clear. Because while I do believe the episodes have declined in quality, that doesn't mean James is lazy or any of the Cinemassacre cast members are antagonists in his story. It's fair to criticize his work, but to me, the current quality says a lot more about the growing issues with the YouTube landscape than it does about James or anyone making the videos. It's just more difficult for creators to flourish than ever before, and many of the measures taken to adapt over the years have come with heavy costs. But the reason I'm mentioning all of this again is because for the first time in over 3 years since these criticisms began, James responded to them directly.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're still watching AVGN after 15 years. I'm so glad to have people with a good sense of humor to appreciate this stuff, and I hope to keep the entertainment coming. And I'll even address a few complaints of the asshole-ish variety, which does not represent the majority of you. But yeah, that'll be fun.
On August 6, 2021, James posted a room tour to the Cinemassacre channel in which he mentions the changes made to his video creation process in recent years and acknowledges a lot of the criticism he and Screenwave have gotten as a result.
So hating on them for the work they do is not fair to them, and it's not fair to me.
A lot of what he says echoes the overarching points I've discussed here and in my other aforementioned Decline of Cinemassacre essay. But he also delves into topics that offer a much better behind-the-scenes look at the situation, and for that reason I thought it would be interesting to go over them. I don't usually take a first-person perspective on subjects like this or involve my personal opinion, but in this situation, the entire dilemma revolves around opinion. Some fans, such as myself, do believe a drop in quality has taken place with the AVGN episodes lately, but of course, quality is subjective. But the objective here isn't to throw around insults. It's simply to understand why this opinion has started to become more common by looking at what has changed with Cinemassacre and their process of video creation in recent years.
Some people have asked me, why are you so busy? Most of the people who I've heard from are very nice and they mean well, but there's some who are just mystified or just can't fathom, like, why don't you have time anymore? Take a wild guess. What's the biggest thing that's different now? I have kids.
The first and most obvious reason is because, as stated, James is now a father and can't afford to put as much time into episodes as he had in the past. But this situation isn't as cut and dry as it seems. Many point out that James has had to balance other facets of life with video creation in the past, and especially early on when he was working a conventional job before nerd episodes generated any form of income on their own.
The nerd episodes was just something I did for fun. I made them because I wanted to make them, not because I ever thought I'd get paid for them or anything like that. So I was doing the videos for free that entire year. Just knowing that people were being entertained by them was all the reward I needed. But the truth is, I was also working a regular full-time job at the time, and it was really hard to be able to do both. I didn't have a lot of spare time, so when I'd come home from work, I'd go straight to work on the nerd episodes, and honestly, I don't even know how I was able to do it. Although I wasn't doing the movie reviews yet or any of the other videos you see on Cinemassacre.com, it was pretty much just the nerd for that year.
This is where the fundamental difference between then and now starts to become more apparent. Unlike the early years, James' attention is no longer split between just sustaining his income and pursuing his passion. Today, his personal life takes greater priority than ever before, and his efforts are split across many series. And having done them for so long, it may be especially difficult to sustain the drive that comes from genuine passion, given his history of burning out in the past.
Worth a reminder that I'm not only doing AVGN, I'm doing Monster Madness and tons of other videos. And a small fraction of my work hours are actually spent making videos. More of it is maintenance, business stuff, personal errands, anything random that comes up that you'd never see or know about. I would sometimes have to spend up to 18 hours a day to get some of these bigger episodes done. That is no longer possible for me. As a natural fact of life, I have less time now than I did when I was in my 20s making these videos. I must stress, I do not want to burn myself out working on these epic kind of videos all around the clock. I want to be there for the kids. That's my choice to balance my work and family life.
Then comes the complaint that I would argue is the most visible publicly. And that's that many of the recent AVGN episodes are very basic in structure, contain very little variety in how they're filmed, and generally seem to stick to a format. There are two primary reasons for this, with the first being basic episodes are easier to produce in a timely manner because with live action footage, James can stick to simply showing footage of himself on the couch.
The wires run all across the ceiling and into the camera. So that's a lot of stuff I prefer not to move. The purpose of all this is to shoot episodes as quickly as possible. Now, sometimes that can't be done. For example, the Vegas episode was a lot of extra work, and there's always going to be something like that. But for a basic episode, this simple setup greatly improves my workflow. Otherwise, I would have to set up the camera, frame the shot, set the focus, set up the lights, set up the microphone, and check and adjust everything. By having it all set up beforehand, it saves me a lot of time. Now, the only little problem is that I'm locked into this position. Whenever I need a different angle of the room, let's say if the nerd is over at the NES shelf or something, that means everything has to move. The microphone, I have to take this wire down, and then the lights. You can imagine how much of a pain these are. Very little of the time is spent actually filming. But when I'm short on time and trying to be as quick, as convenient, and efficient as possible, I just stick to the couch shot. I'll set up a different angle when there's a good reason and if it's worth the price of time.
The issue with this arises when you consider the fact that this heavily limits what can go on in a typical episode. While mainly confined to the couch, there's no ability to perform physical gags and many of the signature tropes of the series. But it's worth knowing that this new format is not used in every installment.
So nerd episodes come in all shapes and forms. Some are basic and simple, while others are epic and crazy, like the recent Vegas episode. That was the biggest passion project of the year so far and took several months to make. That episode was a giant project and put us behind schedule. The point is, I'm always going to want to do a big episode like that, and that's why we need these basic ones to get caught up again. Remember the Crazy Castle episode? That was epic. What came next? Super Pitfall. You need to balance it out. So you'll definitely see another crazy one when we get there again.
In principle, this is always how AVGN episodes were produced in the past. But to me, the problem that now arises in this situation is that it seems the disparity between these two kinds of episodes is much greater than it was. Not in effort, but in quality. Basic doesn't necessarily mean bad, but if you fall back on a format for the sake of time, it's easy for things to get repetitive. And that's the key distinction from older episodes. Take, for example, Super Pitfall, which James himself just mentioned.
Super Pitfall. One of the most deceptive uses of the word super in video game history. You want to know why? You want to know why this game super sucks? You want to see how hard they cranked up the diarrhea dial? Just watch. Nice. Fucking beautiful. The first ladder you see drops you into a pit where you get killed by a bird or a bat, whatever it is. And even if it wasn't there, I'd fall on the spikes. So it's basically death insurance. Let's put every kind of obstacle we can possibly think of in the very beginning of the game. You know, I'm disappointed. Couldn't there have been lava on top of the spikes with fire sharks swimming in it? Couldn't there be more spikes coming from the sides ready to close in and squash me while stabbing at the same time? How about some laser cannons and upside down volcanoes?
While there are very few live action shots, the video primarily focuses on the absurdity of what's going on in the game. And this works since it offers a lot of joke material. The humor is kept dense and the visuals follow what he's discussing. For this reason, they never stagnate or feel reused. And this can be just as enjoyable. On IMDb, the Crazy Castle and Super Pitfall episodes are 0.2 apart in rating, both over 8 out of 10. Compare that with the entirety of the 8 episodes in the most recent season, many of which don't even break 6 out of 10, whether basic or not. In fact, Super Pitfall has a higher rating than all but one installment of the past 3 seasons of AVGN. From the way James talks about simplistic episodes, it seems as though he views quality to be based solely on the complexity of the film work without considering other factors.
Some people have felt the need to point out whenever there's a basic episode that's lacking the multiple camera angles. As if I'm not aware. I'm a guy who makes movies. I like different camera angles. If I had the choice, every episode would be as dynamic and cinematic as possible. In 2006, there was a bunch of real basic episodes that we might be forgetting about, like McKids, Wally Bear, and Double Dragon 3. Those ones were so basic, they would hardly even be accepted as full episodes by the current standards I've set.
But I think we can all agree bigger isn't necessarily better. Better is better. Showing less live action footage is better than showing repetitive footage, because not every review inherently needs live action material. If viewers genuinely had a problem with episodes being basic rather than repetitive, James would have been facing this backlash for years. Because as you've seen, episodes like Super Pitfall are perceived much better than the current material. Clearly something has changed. Were he to stray from the new format aside from just times where he's looking to step it up and create a cinematic spectacle, the repetition wouldn't be nearly as apparent. Sometimes, less is more. And when something is simplified to a template like this, it gives the impression that the creator is tired of it. This may be true for James, but given that AVGN is his livelihood, there's no other option but to continue no matter what.
The other comment that I get every now and then is that I should quit AVGN. Sometimes it's from fans who mean well. They can tell I'm getting burned out or whatever. But hey, look, this is fun. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. And most importantly, this is my day job. This is how I pay my bills and support my kids. You want me to quit? I'd rather be doing this job than something boring. I'm lucky. And I know that most of the people who say that are nice and kind, and they just mean, hey, you don't have to keep doing this. You're allowed to quit if you want. And I appreciate that. But what I'd also like to hear is, hey, you're allowed to do a basic episode or do them less often rather than going to the most extreme to quit. Maybe someday the time will come, but not now. And if and whenever it does, I'll let you know.
Despite Cinemassacre having countless series over the years, AVGN remained its most popular, but is also the most labor-intensive to produce, and he's in no position to quit. Given this scenario, it's only likely that James would seek outside assistance in producing his content.
So when you have a project to do, but you don't have enough time, what do? You get help. While most of the fans watching are really awesome and already get it, there's some people who are trying to be counterproductive to the whole thing by saying they don't like Screenwave, or they don't like them being involved in the videos, or whatever it is. Do these people not want me to have any help? Do they want me to suffer and do everything myself? They probably just haven't logically thought it through. Screenwave helps me make the videos. Without them, if I was doing it all by myself, you'd probably see only 3 videos a year. Would you want that? And it wouldn't matter if I worked with somebody different. Over the years, people have given me shit for working with Screw Attack, game trailers. It doesn't matter. I think there seems to be a misconception that I don't do anything.
One thing to note about the fan backlash regarding Screenwave is that many attribute their involvement as being the reason they see a decline in content quality. Whether it's true or not, that critique is unique to them. Game trailers and Screw Attack both pose different issues, with the most noteworthy of which being that when partnered, new AVGN episodes were required to be hosted on GameTrailers.com for exclusively 1 year until they were allowed to also come out on the YouTube channel. There's no denying there have been drawbacks to working under networks in the past, but that doesn't invalidate audience concerns regarding Screenwave, even if their interference isn't as constricting as their predecessors. However, I myself don't believe Screenwave's to blame for the current issues. As the old saying goes, too many chefs spoil the broth. Short of having an army of clones, the inclusion of other people in production will always change the end result. Sometimes this can be an improvement, but other times not. It's a toss-up in these situations. And James is right in saying they know his system better than anyone, so I'd be surprised if there was a more ideal group out there for him. Had the previous networks like Screw Attack tried aiding James in production like Screenwave is now, there's no evidence to say the result would be any better. But that said, changing the episode titles and thumbnails along with some of the more unnecessary alterations to things may be what contribute to how they're viewed in the fandom. It's not as if there can't be problems with what they're doing just because they're helpful overall. Although when it comes to episode quality, the new time constraints are likely to blame.
In a perfect world, I could take as long as possible, but lately we've been doing 2 episodes a month with contracted brand deals and deadlines, not to mention all the other videos I'm working on. So when I'm behind schedule and in a rush, I have to stick to this single one-shot setup, or else the video won't get finished in time.
Even if you want to argue that the constricting episode format could have been Screenwave's idea, time is the root of the quality issue for this reason. As someone who has personally worked with sponsors in the past, there are a lot of guidelines that need to be followed in a tight time frame. With YouTube being in the state that it is, the amount of money to be made from ad revenue is a fraction of what sponsors are willing to give you, especially for Cinemassacre, given the shorter length and vulgarity of the AVGN series. If an episode isn't demonetized, its runtime can only fit so many ads, which on their own may not even cover the production costs. Taking sponsorships is the solution, but at the price of having ironclad release deadlines. While working with Screw Attack, he had the same production schedule at 2 episodes per month in 2010 and worked single-handedly, but soon reached a point of burnout that required him to take a 2-month break. This was before having kids, and AVGN being his only series. Today, he's attempting to minimize involvement and balance his other tasks to avoid burnout. But this has led to another change that I believe has had a much bigger impact on the series than anyone might have guessed. No matter how much is done to aid him behind the scenes, James is still the bottleneck by needing to act as the nerd character in each episode, something which he has taken measures to cut down time on.
Well, this is the teleprompter. I use it for the longer speeches, especially for the movie reviews. That way I can look directly at the camera while reading the script for the entire duration of the video. I still mess up and flub some lines, but it cuts down on trying to remember and rehearse. When I'm speaking on camera the whole time, I have the flexibility of being able to select which parts I want to show myself or cut to other images. Typically, when I don't have any images to show for what I'm talking about, I'll just show myself. Generic. For the nerd videos, I usually read the voiceover or narration right off the script, but the on-camera parts, I use the teleprompter for the long speeches, and otherwise I just rehearse or even ad-lib sometimes. So this way I can read while looking directly at the camera.
One of the things I myself have noticed in the newer AVGN episodes is that James's delivery is very different than older episodes in a way that's hard to describe, and I think this explains it. When reciting lines from memory, it's easier to put emphasis on the performance, but while reading, your focus is split between acting and taking in what you're seeing. I'm well aware James himself has always recorded the AVGN episode narration bits directly from the script, but when you're on camera, there are far more factors to consider. It's easier to not emote as much when your attention is partially on reading, something which which is especially important for a character as expressive as the nerd. But whether this truly makes a difference or not is up to speculation. But when analyzing differences between the older and newer episodes, this is something we know for a fact has changed in the production process.
So right now I'm rehearsing off the script because unlike the voiceover segments where I'm reading, this time I have to memorize it. I choose not to use a teleprompter or anything like that.
At the end of the day, a lot has changed in the time since the start of AVGN, both with the series itself, the platform hosting it, and the lives of its creators. While there is a subset of fans who have grown to dislike newer episodes, myself included, I think it's only fair to admit that not everything is in James's control. That said, short of bullying, I still think it's fair to criticize the newer episodes because whether anything can be done or not, people have the right to dislike the newer videos and be vocal about that. Even though it's clear James is fed up with these remarks, I don't think anything was gained in addressing them as he did.
I wish I didn't say that. It was like pissing up a drainage pipe. It all comes back to you.
Personally, I do believe there are ways to improve the episodes as mentioned, and within the time limitations, but the goal here is not to state my opinion to Cinemassacre, because they have more than enough of that already. The goal is simply to try to understand the situation and explain to others who may be angry at the wrong people. It's up to you to make your own judgments, but to me, the decline of Cinemassacre is merely the result of natural changes of life, and while the fandom may want someone to blame, sometimes there just isn't one.
It's